As we just heard today, Christ is violently against television. On the way down from the mountain, he tells the disciples, tell the vision to no one. Case closed, no TV. But if you have been disobedient to Christ and watching television, but you might have learned about the biggest celebrity this past week. Someone that has captured the hearts and minds of our whole world. Someone that has inspired millions of posts online talking about how much they love and care for this person. I saw one post that said, I would literally die for him. I would also kill for him. And I will not be happy till he is happy. Who is this character that inspired such passion? His name is Punch, and he is a baby monkey. And the reason Punch has gotten so much acclaim because when he was born, his mother abandoned him. Thus, his caretakers at the zoo, they gave him a stuffed orangutan that Punch began to carry around, to cuddle with, to cling to it, to treat it like it's his mother. But every time Punch approaches other real monkeys, he gets bullied, gets pushed away, gets rejected, and he runs back to his plushy mother for support. He is this cute little monkey carrying a cute little monkey. It's really cute, but he yearns for real connection, but instead is forced to settle for something that's artificial. I think why Punch the Monkey is so appealing because we see ourselves in him. That we all want some real connection, something meaningful in our life. But what happens? We try, we get rejected, and we're forced to return to that artificiality. During Lent, we're talking about how the Lord invites us into a real life. But so often, we settle for an artificial life. In our gospel today, we heard about the transfiguration, in which Christ reveals his glory to Peter, James, and John. And what does Peter do? He says, Lord, this is great. Let us build some booths. Why booths? Because booths were on his mind. Scholars say that this scene takes place during the Feast of Booths, which Israel commemorated how they lived in booths during the wandering in the desert. How for 40 years, they lived totally dependent upon the Lord. Thus, they had no stability in life, no permanent homes, no reliable source of food or water, just manna from heaven, water from a rock, and booths. The Feast of Booths, it was a party to celebrate and remember this time of absolute dependence upon the Lord. And Peter was saying, Lord, this moment is so good, I just want to stay here. Let's just stay in the glory and stay in party mode. But Peter was missing the entire point of the Feast of Booths, the entire point of the Transfiguration, the entire point of the Christian faith. These moments are great, but they aren't it. They point to a deeper reality. The Jews wandering in the desert, they had the presence of God on the way to the promised land. The Christ being divine is divine at all times. Our Christian faith is having God with us even now. And these flashy moments of glory, they're great, but we ought not to stay in them. Because the very next verse, the Shekinah appears. That's a fancy word for the cloud of God's glory, the cloud that led Israel in the Exodus. And from the Shekinah, God says, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." Okay, listening. What does Christ say next? The Son of Man must suffer and die and be raised on the third day. If you wish to follow me, you too must deny yourself and take up your cross daily. That does not sound like party mode. And if that were the selling point of Christianity, who would be here? Imagine trying to evangelize. You say, you got to find the thing that kills you and embrace it every day. You must look in the mirror at yourself and say no. You'd say no. God forbid that happens. Because you see, Christ says the same thing a chapter earlier in Matthew 16. Once Peter declares, you are the Christ, Christ says, cool, I'm going to suffer and die. And if you want to follow me, you have to do the same thing. Peter says, God forbid that will happen. No. And Christ says, get behind me, Satan. The next chapter, Matthew 17, the transfiguration. And that's why Christ reveals his glory to the apostles. So when he begins his long march to Calvary, to suffering, to death, to the resurrection, they have this fuller context of Christ's divinity. So that when suffering comes, when their expectations collapse, when they encounter their limits, instead of building something artificial, and try to extend some good thing beyond it being good, they can recognize the Jesus I have spent the past 3 years with is the same Jesus that I saw on the mountain. This Jesus that's hanging on the cross before me and dying, that's the one that I saw shine in glory. He's God at all times. I could trust him and be here in this real life, no matter the suffering. The problem with Punch the Monkey is that he has no options besides this artificial comfort of a plush orangutan mother. But as Christians, we do. We have God. Not God dramatically present at all times in flashy ways that takes away our ability to choose him freely, but God hidden. And just as the glory of our Lord was hidden while he walked on earth, it didn't change reality. Though it changed during the transfiguration was not Christ, but rather the eyes of the apostles to see the deeper reality of Christ's glory that's always present. May our eyes change to see the reality of God present here in the Eucharist, the reality of God present in our life in glory. For this week, I have 2 tips. Tip 1, mountaintop experiences are awesome and necessary, and you need to have that dramatic encounter to have the strength to move. Just imagine if all you knew about marriage was mortgages, having to share the remote and being forced to watch rom-coms. So you have to change dirty diapers. If that was all we knew, no one would get married. But when marriage is the natural extension of an emotional, loving encounter between 2 souls, it just happens. You are propelled to this selfless way of life. The human heart has 2 modes, infatuation mode and sacrificial love mode. And infatuation is not bad. It's what moves us to that sacrificial love. And that's why it's important for us to have a mountaintop experience in our love life, but also in our faith life. That's why I'm inviting all of you to sign up for our spring retreat. It's called Return to Me. It'll be March 20th to 22nd. That's the week after spring break, so coming up. You can sign up online. You're all invited to come rest, to come receive, to rejoice, to come to the mountaintop and encounter Christ in his glory, which will not be on a mountain, will be by a lake. So tip 1 is to come to the retreat. And tip 2, the transfiguration ends with the apostles face down in holy terror and given comfort by the touch of Jesus. And they look up and they see Jesus alone. No more Old Testament heroes, no more dazzling white clothes, no more Shekinahs, just Jesus alone. How did they feel? Were they disappointed? Was that enough for them? For us, is Jesus alone enough? Or do we yearn to artificially extend the mountaintop experience? I think for myself, I encountered Christ's love for me at a retreat. It was this overwhelming experience of God's love for me in the Eucharist. But what made my faith more real and less artificial, more real and less pure emotion, was what I did next. Because before the Eucharist, in this abiding reality of God's divinity, I made a vow to spend 10 minutes at the end of every Mass praying silently. I held to that until I became a priest. People after Mass wanted to talk to me. Blech. But in high school, I did that, after every Mass. We would have Mass before getting on the bus for band competitions. And I was always the last one on the bus, despite my band director's chagrin. In seminary, I would skip breakfast and just pray until class started. In college, I remember one time after Mass, a girl asked me if I was asleep. I said, no, I'm doing this thing called prayer. Have you heard of it? But this moment with the Lord, it was so important to me. Once I received Holy Communion, I gave Him my all. I stopped singing. I just rested completely in His love. I gave Him 10 minutes after every Mass. Sometimes it was full of wonder of transfiguration. Sometimes it was full of boredom. Sometimes it was sleep. But every time, though, it was full of His glory. Because Christ was there. And I was there with Him. And it was not staying artificially at the mountaintop that brought me to a deeper faith, but intentionally being with the Lord every day of my life. So what do you do to be with the Lord every day of your life? What matters most in your prayer life is not intensity. What matters most in your prayer life is not intensity, it is consistency. Just being with God every moment and walking with Him every moment. Is that how we measure our prayer life? By our feelings? Because those come and go. We can't control them. What we can control, though, is our actions. So tip 2, ask, what actions do I do to be with Christ more fully every day? The root definition of the artificial life is the one you build yourself. The definition of a real life is one you discover and receive from God. One is a booth that will provide temporary comfort, but will ultimately collapse. The other is the journey to the promised land, which our hearts were made for. And God's with us. May we receive the real life from God and allow Him to be with us on our journey through the Mount of Transfiguration, to the Mount of Calvary, and ultimately to the mountaintop of heaven. God bless.